She arrived at the house carrying flowers. The family embraced her at the door. By 1 in the afternoon, 2 of them were dying, and nobody in that house understood why. The first doctors who treated the victims assumed food poisoning. The forensic laboratory assumed the same thing and started running every standard test in the book. What happened next is the part of this case that keeps me up at night because the science failed completely. Every test came back clean, and the 2 people who had eaten that breakfast were already dead. When I first read the case file, I thought the investigators must have missed something obvious. Then I understood what she had actually done, and obvious is the last word I would use to describe it. My name is Harrison Cross, and this is the Blackout tapes. The case I'm bringing you today comes out of Goiânia, the capital of the Brazilian state of Goiás, and it centers on the deaths of 2 people on December 17th, 2023. Their names were Leonardo Pereira Alves, 58 years old, a physician, and his mother, Luzia Tereza Alves, 86 years old. They were poisoned at home, at their own breakfast table, by a woman named Amanda Partata Mortoza, a practicing lawyer and the former girlfriend of Leonardo's son. The relationship that preceded these deaths lasted 45 days. What followed those 45 days lasted 4 months, was documented across hundreds of pages of police reports, digital forensics, toxicology files, and judicial records, and ended with 2 funerals in December. This episode follows the investigation from the beginning, which means we have to go back further than the morning of December 17th. We have to go back to August. Leonardo Pereira Alves Filho is the son of one victim and the grandson of the other. He is a physician, like his father. He began a relationship with Amanda Partata in the summer of 2023. According to the case file compiled by the Goiás Civil Police, the relationship lasted approximately 45 days and ended on August 10th, 2023. I want to sit with that number for a moment. 45 days. The duration of a short vacation, and what that ending triggered, according to every document I've reviewed, was a campaign of psychological and eventually physical destruction that lasted 4 months and killed the 2 people closest to the man who walked away. I want to be careful about what the documents actually show versus what I'm interpreting. What the files confirm is the sequence of actions that followed the breakup. What I'm reading into those actions is a pattern, and I think the pattern is visible to anyone who looks at the timeline honestly. The harassment began, according to police records, before the relationship was even formally over. Investigators placed the start of the campaign at July 27, 2023, 2 weeks before the breakup was official. Leonardo Filho began receiving threatening messages by SMS and silent phone calls that showed different numbers each time. Over the following months, investigators confirmed he received communications through more than 100 distinct phone numbers. That is not the work of someone acting in a moment of grief or rage. That volume requires software, planning, and sustained operational effort across weeks. The technology is called call spoofing. It allows the originator of a call to display any number they choose on the recipient's screen. The account used to run this operation was registered under the name of Amanda's brother. But when investigators obtained a court order to inspect the account records, they found that her personal email address and her personal phone number had been used to create the account and set the password recovery options. She was careful enough to use someone else's name. She was not careful enough to use a different email address. That detail will matter again later. Meta's legal compliance team, responding to a judicial order, confirmed the creation and operation of at least 6 fake social media profiles linked to email addresses traceable back to Amanda. From those accounts, threats arrived in a continuous stream. And here is the detail that I found most revealing when I read it in the court documents. Some of those same anonymous accounts sent death threats to Amanda herself. messages in the third person, saying things like, "I'm going to kill you and your little girlfriend." She was threatening herself. The visible purpose was to position herself as a fellow target, to give the family a reason to protect her, to keep her inside the circle rather than push her out. And then came the pregnancy. Immediately after the breakup, Amanda announced she was pregnant. She attributed paternity to Leonardo Filho. What followed was not a quiet, personal claim. It was a months-long performance, documented in police records and court filings. She presented physical symptoms in front of the family: mourning, nausea, dizziness. The kind of visible fragility that instinctively softens a family toward you, that makes them quieter around you, more patient, more protective. The performance reached a specific peak when she organized a gender reveal party. In Brazil, as in many places, this is a social celebration where family and friends gather to learn the biological sex of the expected child. Amanda organized this event. She attended alongside the family of the man she had dated for 45 days. She presented what appeared to be a clinical fetal sexing examination confirming the baby was a girl. There are photographs of that celebration in the case record. The family was celebrating. What they were celebrating did not exist. When police executed a search warrant at Amanda's residence in Itumbiara, in the southern region of Goiás, on December 28, 2023, they found pregnancy tests with negative results dated to August and December of that year. Her own defense team, in a procedural filing, submitted laboratory blood work to the court showing her beta-HCG hormone levels at 0. Not low, 0. There was no pregnancy. There had never been a pregnancy. The child she used to maintain her presence inside that household was constructed entirely from a lie, sustained over months, detailed enough to support a celebration, cold enough to be used as a key to open a door she intended to walk through with poison. I don't think the fake pregnancy was just about maintaining contact. My reading of the document sequence is that it served a specific tactical function. It made Amanda untouchable. You don't question the motives of a pregnant woman who comes bearing pastries. You don't search the bag she's carrying. You welcome her, you sit her down, you offer her coffee. The pregnancy didn't just keep her inside the social circle. It disabled the family's instinct to be guarded around her. Between December 14th and 16th, 2023, Amanda traveled from Itumbiara to Goiânia. The Goiás civil police reconstructed her movements in detail from hotel records, credit card transactions, and device activity logs. She arrived on Thursday, December 14th, citing prenatal appointments as the reason for the trip. Friday, December 15th, she bought clothing. Saturday, December 16th, she did not leave her hotel room. The device activity from that Saturday is part of the evidence I find most difficult to read quickly without stopping. Her browsing records from that day and the days immediately preceding it document a systematic search for a very specific category of information. She searched for whether poisoning can be detected post-mortem. She searched for which blood tests identify toxic substances and how long certain compounds remain detectable in human tissue. She searched for whether industrial inorganic compounds have detectable odor or taste. She searched the medical term hepatomegalia, which refers to pathological liver enlargement, a symptom consistent with exposure to the compound she would later use. She searched for whether food poisoning alone can be fatal. Read together, those searches form a preparation checklist. She was not researching poison in the abstract. She was verifying, step by step, that the compound she had already chosen would do what she needed it to do, and that it would not be found afterward. The compound itself was purchased online before the trip. Financial records obtained under court order showed she paid the equivalent of less than 65 reais, approximately $12 American, for 100 milliliters of a classified industrial inorganic oxide. The exact name and molecular formula of this substance have been withheld from public disclosure by judicial order, specifically to prevent replication by others. what is documented in the case file, and what forensic specialist Dr. Mayara Cardoso stated in her official report, is that even a small quantity of this compound causes irreversible, simultaneous failure across multiple organ systems, that it is completely colorless, and that it has no detectable odor or taste. It cannot be seen in food, it cannot be smelled, it cannot be tasted, and as the laboratory was about to discover, it cannot be found if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. On the morning of Sunday, December 17th, 2023, Amanda arrived at the Alves family home in an upscale residential neighborhood of Goiânia. She brought flowers. Witnesses confirmed she was received warmly, with the kind of welcome a family extends to the woman they believe is carrying their next generation. She offered to handle breakfast. She left, went to a well-known local bakery and delicatessen in the city, and purchased cheese breads, assorted biscuits, fruit juices, and 4 individual units of bolo de pote, a popular Brazilian layered cake served in sealed jars. At some point between the purchase and her return to the house, she introduced the compound into the contents of 2 of the 4 jars. The Goiás Technical Scientific Police Forensic Report documented that the safety seals on those 2 jars had been violated and resealed without visible rupture. The poison was homogenized directly into the body of the dessert. It was invisible. It had no smell. It tasted like nothing except the cake it was hidden inside. Other members of the family were present at that table. The grandfather of Leonardo Filho, 82 years old, declined the dessert because of his pre-existing diabetes. An uncle declined because he was saving his appetite for lunch. Neither man knew the word decline would save his life that morning. Leonardo Pereira Alves and his mother, Luzia Tereza Alves, ate the bolo de pote at around 10 in the morning. By 1 in the afternoon, both had collapsed. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to stop here and talk about Leonardo and Luzia as people, because the forensic and legal architecture of this case is extraordinary, and it is easy to let the mechanics crowd out the human beings at the center of it. Leonardo Pereira Alves was 58 years old. He was a physician who had spent his adult life in medicine. He was a father. He was a man who, on a Sunday morning in December, sat at the table in his own home and shared a meal with his family. He did not know he was in danger. Nothing in the social logic of that moment, the familiar space, the person he had been led to trust, the food that looked and tasted like food, would have told him to be suspicious. He was admitted to an intensive care unit that afternoon and died the same evening, December 17th, before investigators understood what had happened. Luzia Tereza Alves was 86 years old. She had lived through nearly 9 decades. She was a matriarch, the gravitational center of her family. When she was admitted to the hospital, the physicians treating her did not know she had been poisoned. They saw a severely ill elderly woman with symptoms that mirrored acute food poisoning, and they treated her accordingly, because that is what the evidence in front of them suggested. She died in the early hours of December 18th, Monday morning, still fighting a cause her doctors could not name, while investigators were only beginning to piece together what had occurred. Mayara Cardoso's forensic report on the compound's mechanism of action describes a cascade of simultaneous systemic failures. The kidneys stop filtering. The cardiac muscle is disrupted at the structural level. The liver sustains massive tissue damage. Neurological function degrades as cellular ion balance collapses. It does not present like a recognizable poisoning. It presents like a body failing everywhere at once, which is precisely what made it so difficult to identify and precisely what made it so lethal so quickly. The first phase of the forensic investigation was a failure. The Goiás Technical Scientific Police Laboratory, working under emergency protocols with round-the-clock staffing, conducted what the case documents describe as a full-spectrum toxicological analysis of the biological tissue collected during both autopsies, as well as samples from the food items recovered from the crime scene. Analysts ran systematic tests for more than 300 individual compounds: agricultural pesticides, rat poisons, organophosphate insecticides, carbamate compounds, benzodiazepines, barbiturates, cardiac medications, botanical alkaloids, heavy metal agents. They ran 300 tests. Every single result came back negative. 300 tests, all negative, and 2 people dead from poison. The laboratory was looking at the right samples, using the right equipment, applying the right methodology. The problem was, the compound had been specifically selected to be invisible to every standard screening panel in use. Amanda had done the research. She knew what the laboratory would look for. She chose something that was not on the list. This is where the case pivots on something I find genuinely unsettling when I think about what it means. The science alone was not enough. The investigation was saved not by a more sophisticated test, but by the digital trail she left behind. Investigators working the financial and digital forensic track had, in parallel with the laboratory analysis, obtained court orders to access Amanda's device records, browser history, and purchase data. The e-commerce receipt for the industrial compound was in her financial records. The molecular identity of what she had purchased was in her browser history, buried between searches about detection windows and organ failure symptoms. That information was extracted from the digital files and transmitted directly to the forensic laboratory. With the exact molecular signature now identified, analysts calibrated their instruments for a single targeted test. The compound appeared immediately. It was in the gastric tissue recovered from both autopsies. It was embedded in the contents of 2 of the 4 bolo de pote jars collected from the crime scene. It was not present in the other 2 jars. It was not present in any product sample taken directly from the bakery. The Goiás Technical Scientific Police issued a formal statement exonerating the confectionery entirely. The contamination was targeted, deliberate, and introduced after the products left the store. She had searched, "Is it possible to detect poisoning?" in her browser days before the murders, confident the answer was no. She was right about the chemistry. She had not accounted for the invoice. After Leonardo died on the evening of December the 17th, Amanda left the family and sought emergency care at a hospital in Itumbiara. She reported abdominal symptoms similar to those of the victims and staged what investigators described in their reports as a simulated emotional breakdown and suicide attempt. The apparent design was to position herself as another casualty of whatever had gone wrong at that breakfast and to shift potential suspicion toward the bakery that had sold the food. The narrative of accidental mass contamination from a commercial source would have redirected any investigation away from her entirely. Investigators saw through it quickly, but it was not an improvised move. It was one more layer of a structure that had been built in advance. She was arrested on December 20th, 2023, while seeking shelter at a psychiatric institution in Aparecida de Goiânia. Her defense team requested psychiatric evaluation early in the proceedings, a legitimate legal mechanism under Brazilian criminal law. If found fully insane, a defendant can be removed from criminal culpability entirely. The evaluation was conducted by a forensic medical panel appointed by the Goiás State Court of Justice, Tribunal de Justiça do Estado de Goiás, and the results were published in April of 2024. The panel concluded she was fully capable, fully aware of the criminality of her actions at the time of the crimes, with no diagnosable mental illness affecting cognition or volition. The report specifically noted evidence of planning, premeditation, and deliberate steps taken to prevent detection. Delegado Carlos Alfama, the lead investigator, described the behavioral profile of the case to the press as consistent with a level of psychopathy uncommon in the standard homicide investigations processed by the Goiás Civil Police. That framing matters because psychopathy as a clinical personality trait and legal insanity as a criminal defense are not the same category. The panel drew that line explicitly. The sentença de pronúncia, The Brazilian judicial ruling that formally sends a case to jury trial was issued following the psychiatric report. It confirmed sufficient evidence of both authorship and material criminality across multiple charges. 2 counts of qualified homicide, 2 counts of attempted qualified homicide targeting the grandfather and the uncle who did not eat the dessert, charges of stalking, falsification of documents, and threats. Amanda's license with the Ordem dos Advogados do Brasil, Goiás section, has been suspended. She was transferred to a standard provisional detention facility when that suspension eliminated her legal professional custody privileges. As of February 2026, defense attorney Rodrigo Faut was still arguing, without new psychiatric documentation, that his client lacked the psychological capacity for testimony. The jury trial is projected for 2027, pending appellate challenges currently in motion. There is one detail in the case file that I have not been able to set aside since the first time I read it. Among the anonymous messages sent to Leonardo Filho through the spoofed network before any of this became visible, before anyone had connected Amanda to the threats or understood what she was building toward, there was a specific line directed at him. Afterwards, it won't help to cry over their blood. Not his blood. Their blood. The police report documents that message. It was sent weeks before December 17th. And if you read it knowing what came next, it is no longer ambiguous. It is a notification. She was telling him exactly what she intended to do, protected by the anonymity of a network she believed was untraceable, knowing he would receive the threat without understanding it. My reading of that detail, and I want to be clear, this is interpretation, not documented fact, is that the anonymous threat was not purely functional. She did not need to send that message to execute the plan. She sent it because she wanted him to receive it. She wanted him to feel it afterward, to read it again and understand that he had been told that the warning was given and that there was nothing he could have done. That is a particular kind of cruelty. It is not the cruelty of someone overwhelmed by rage. It is the cruelty of someone who wanted the suffering to be witnessed. The 2 people at the center of this case were not symbols or data points. They were Leonardo Pereira Alves, a physician who spent his adult life caring for other people's health, and Luzia Tereza Alves, an 86-year-old woman who had built a family across nearly 9 decades of living. They died in the same hospital system Leonardo had worked within. They died without understanding what was happening to their bodies. They died because they were the people who would cause the most pain to someone else if they were gone. That is what this case ultimately is, beneath the forensic science and the legal machinery and the digital forensics and the 300 negative tests. It is the story of 2 people who were chosen to suffer and die because of who they loved and who loved them. The jury trial will decide Amanda Partata's legal fate. The evidence, by every measure I've applied to this case, is substantial. But 2 things cannot be undone by any verdict. The 86 years Luzia Tereza Alves lived before a Sunday morning in December became her last, and the career Leonardo Pereira Alves spent healing people before someone walked into his home carrying flowers and something she had ordered online for $12. This is Harrison Cross. This has been the Blackout Tapes.